We all know that following a big presidential election, a lot of people tune out of the news. Well, boy, have people tuned out in the time between the 2020 election and now, but not equally. Importantly, we're gonna look at some numbers coming from a new poll from Gallup and the Knight Foundation. This is the percentage of Americans who pay, quote, a great deal of attention to the news by political affiliation. And you can see there, assuming you're not on mobile, in which case RIP, that the blue line, the Democrats who have paid a great deal of attention to the news, has dropped from something like 70% down to 34%, actually dropping below the Republican numbers, which are also down, but only by a few percentage points. Independents as well have to some extent checked out. They had reached sort of a high, partway through the pandemic of nearly 50%, that's down to 29%. So everybody's numbers are down. The Democrats are down the most. And so, Ray, what do you think about this? How does this potentially affect the job that we have to do as news analysts and broadcasters to get people invested in all this stuff?
Yeah, I think it doesn't surprise me, and something that I sort of like try to remind people as they get very bogged down in like sort of not the news that's being spoken by political analysts, but like some inter-political analyst drama that no one really cares about this. Most people aren't even consuming the news. You have to do a lot to get people to pay attention. And it's not. I'm not saying that that's like a bad quality in people. The news is horrendous. It's hard to pay attention to, especially if you are on the side of the issues that's correct. If you believe in climate change, the news is hard to watch. If you care about criminal justice reform, the news is hard to watch. And it's a lot easier for people to just disassociate, which is why I think, it's really good to do community organizing and build sort of inter-community awareness of issues and on the ground fighting, because some of those people who don't pay attention to mainstream news or consume news like that, can be brought into those issues to care about those issues and fight for it in a meaningful way.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great strategy, by the way. If you start to feel yourself being pushed out or burnt out, there might be areas of this whole thing. It's a multifaceted battle, multi-level battle. There might be areas that you can, sustain yourself, investing in. And as a quick aside, as I always say, in response to what Ray said, it is difficult. It's difficult following the news. It's difficult talking about the news. If you need to take time off, you should. You should. Sometimes people will send super chats and be like, "Hey, I'm sorry I haven't watched in a few months." Don't be sorry. Like, I'm glad to have you back. I want you to watch. But if you need to take time off, take time off. It's rough. I understand that. That's why we try to have fun. Obviously, the stuff that we're talking about, the stakes are as high as they could be, but it is difficult. Now, there's a few interesting things about this. One, the fact that Democrats have dropped so much, again, I agree with Ray. I'm not super surprised by that. There's a few good reasons for that. You're going to be more invested when the opposition is in charge, potentially. And so that poll that we showed you only goes back to like 2018. So who knows what that looked like in the late Obama years or anything like that. So it's gonna drop a little bit after the election. Elections are high stakes affairs, you're super invested in it. The pandemic has been really wearing on people, I think. And the big drop has largely happened during 2021. So what happened in regards to like Biden? He's in charge now, the Democrats are in charge. What happened throughout 2021? Basically nothing. Like, I hope you stayed invested in the fight to try to get Manchin and Sinema to do right, but there wasn't a lot of great sustaining news. Maybe you would have had a spike if he had canceled student loan debt or accomplished any of his other goals and promises that he said he would. But I'm sort of surprised that 1 out of 3 Democrats is still paying a great deal of attention to the news, considering how horrific and in some areas non-eventful the news has been.
I think that one thing that the Democrats should take away from this is they need to stop being so obsessed with what the news says about them. Because like if you just look at this, Democrats aren't really paying attention. Democratic voters aren't paying attention to the news. They have this hyperfixation on what's being printed about them and what the CNN and MSNBC analysts are going to say about them. I mean, I know people who worked for Adam Schiff, and they said that one of the first things he would do every day was have someone drop off at his office a stack of like newspapers or printouts of like the headlines and what the pundits are saying in response to what the Democrats are thinking about possibly maybe in the future doing. And it's that sort of obsession that prevents actual action, because what's being printed by the pundits does not actually translate into what the voters care about or what the voters think about, especially if they're not even consuming that media. So the way that they sort of use those headlines and what the news pundits who are sort of entrenched in beltway thinking are going to say about it as a deciding factor in whether or not to pursue legislation and policy goals is just, it's an outdated way of doing things, and it's absurd, and they need to move away from it.
Yeah, no, I agree. A few of the random thoughts. One, polls like this, you always have to sort of question little bits of it. So what does a great deal of attention mean? What does news mean? What are you including? What are you not including potentially? Both from the pollster's point of view and the individual respondents. There's all sorts of news. Some people pay a lot of attention to sports news. That is news. It's different than political news. Also, as you saw from the end of 2020 to now, the all news numbers have dropped, but Republicans least of all. Independents have dropped off by a good chunk, actually. Like that's like a 50% drop there. Democrats by even more. And by the way, remember, like Democrat here can mean a lot of things. It can incorporate a lot. Like I would be classified as a Democrat, even though I despise Democrats, obviously. So with the Democrat and independent numbers dropping down and the Republican numbers staying kind of not shallow, a little bit down, but not too bad. If you've noticed some people shifting in their rhetoric, the issues that they focus on, there might be a profit-seeking reason for it as people dropped off throughout 2021. I'm not saying anything. The numbers are just saying something. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.